Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are just putting the finishing touches on night one of the CBB season. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you enjoyed that little marathon run there. Sure was fun. Great to have college basketball back in our lives. Man, definitely gets the juices flowing. That was fantastic. Before we get started on tonight's slate breakdown, do want to remind you we have the promotion still going on. Code NIGHTHOOPS, NIGHTHOOPS. Get yourself 50% off your first month of any sub. That means you could go to FTN Daily, get the daily plus, monthly, get that $50 off. Makes it like $19.99 for that first month. You can go over to FTN Bets, get the deal there. You can go annual. You can do so many things. And not only do you get the college sports content, but you get professional sports content. You get betting content, pick trackers, articles, behind the paywall Discord shows, Discord chats where we're answering questions, dropping, all today, put together a little stat broadcast, sidearm stats, so that when we need to know who's starting or any news, you can just click that link and boom, starters are right there. Help us make those decisions. I honestly put our Discord up against anyone else in the space, especially for college and niche sports, but just like overall DFS purposes, our Discord is just amazing. Amazing. Let's turn that little heat down there. So tonight we're going to get into we're going to stick with DraftKings primarily. We do have 11 game slate on tap, a lot of mismatches as we go through the first week or two here. There are going to be a ton. We'll start getting more and more competitive games, and we'll have a really good handle on what we're doing here. I am going to go game by game, the tried and true method that we like to do on the Super Show. At the end, we'll give a 2 to 3 man core. Also, some PrizePicks plays. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then any, early betting lines that we see, whether it's props, totals, parlays, any of that good stuff. We'll talk about that as well. If you're watching live, I continue to be very appreciative. Now, that's going to be too hot for me. Too hot. Turn that down. Continue to be appreciative of you guys who are continuing to process the show, watch the show, support the show. It does mean a lot to me. So slap that like button, drop a comment, share, all that stuff that you guys do. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It really, really is. And it continues to push our show to the very top of the list when people look for college sports or just FTN in general when it comes to sports, DFS, betting, PrizePicks, all that good stuff. All right. And a lot of you got a hold of me earlier today. Like, it's late. I can't watch you live, but we watched it on demand. You guys dropped a comment, got to see that. So that was really cool too. It lets me know you guys are watching it on demand and really appreciating the content that we're providing you. All right. We're going to just jump right in here. I'm a little bit on the tired side. So we're going to go right into the slate here. 11 games on DraftKings. Florida Gulf Coast versus Indiana is where we're going to start. Indiana, 12.5-point favorite. That is interesting. 144-point total. Looking at Indiana, they have obviously, no TJD, a little bit different of a roster here. Xavier Johnson did get that medical waiver to play again. Got to keep him healthy. They did bring in a couple of other players, such as Mackenzie Mbako, who originally was going to be a Duke commit, decided to back out there. Was looking at St. John's and a couple of other places, decided on Indiana. Cal Ware, who transfers over from Oregon to Indiana to kind of fill like a TJD high usage role. He's going to be fantastic. Anthony Walker, who was a role player in his previous stops, comes over to Indiana where he'll be able to shore up the bench. Indiana's bench over the last couple of seasons has been rather lackluster, unreliable. You get these guys for cheap. You kind of talk yourselves into them, and then, they just don't end up doing anything. It's kind of been that way the last few seasons, and there's really only been 3, maybe 4 guys in an Indiana jersey you can really rely on. So I am liking Anthony Walker in this Indiana roster. He played for Miami the last couple of seasons. And then Peyton Sparks, who transferred over from Ball State. Sparks was a very gifted max scorer overall, good rebounder. Somebody that will shore up the team in the future. So looking at Indiana's first exhibition game, that's what we want to talk about here. I am not having good luck with my little heater here, so we're just going to turn that off. Xavier Johnson, 21 minutes in that one against Marion. They won 94-61, getting Xavier Johnson back to a healthy status, getting him acclimated to the speed of the game. They did quite well with him. 8 points, 1 rebound, 7 assists. He's out there. He's going to drop dimes. He had 3 steals. XJ, definitely somebody who is a solid source of steals. Right in 21 minutes, he looked solid there. Cal Ware had a really big game, 20 points, 11 rebounds, and a block in 26 minutes. Ware is going to have a really nice season under the Hoosiers roster. I think he's going to be fantastic. Kind of couldn't get going at Oregon. Oregon's a mess. You'd love to see it as a Husky fan, but he's freed and over to Indiana now. Malik Renew, who is going to step up. I'm expecting big things for him in this season. He had 14 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Mbako, 15 points, 3 rebounds and assists, 2 steals and a block, just doing a little bit of everything. Trey Galloway, 4 points, 6 assists and a steal. Anthony Leal did very little, kind of the story of his career thus far. Anthony Walker, 8 points and 6 rebounds with 2 blocks. 23 minutes, feels significant. CJ Gunn, 11 points. Caleb Banks, 12 points, and Gabe Cups in 22 minutes had 6 assists. So that was the Hoosier side there. Looking at prices, Mbako comes in at a very steep 8.5. That's going to be a little bit tough to really justify. I think that I do believe he will be a solid look overall this season. I think we're going to be able to bet some props for him and really feel pretty good about his performance in the Hoosiers roster. But starting out 8.5, yes, it's a matchup against Dunk City that he can do some damage in, but I don't know that we can pay that right away. I would rather drop down here to Cal Ware, who's sitting at 6.7. In the previous pricing of last year, he probably would have been 4.8 or 5K, and everybody would be like, oh my God, we got to roster him in droves. Cal Ware at 6.7 is a very good option. I think he's going to put up some big numbers this year, and he is somebody that I'm looking at for a main team viable option on this Indiana team here in game 1. Malik Renew is only 5K. That's significant. He's going to be a solid source of salary savings. Yesterday/today, we wanted all guards. Forwards were a little bit of a tough spot. Being able to get a solid, cheap forward like Malik is significant with the rest of our build, so I'm definitely looking at him there. You do get Trey Galloway sub 5K, which is pretty typical. I don't love Trey Galloway. I feel like he's going to stand around a lot. That's kind of what he does. With a healthy Xavier Johnson and these other guys, I just don't know what his role is actually going to be beyond just kind of, hey, out of the double team, you get to shoot. If he's not making shots, it's really not going to make too much sense for him as a DFS play. So as he gets cheaper, sure, 4.6 is fine, but kind of a low level value to me. I do like Anthony Walker from GBP's 3.7 just 2 seasons ago, even 3 seasons ago from Miami. He was basically a 22 fantasy point per minute player. Not per minute, per game player, and somebody that I think can, with 20 plus minutes, pay off a 3.7 price tag. So keep an eye on him. You have CJ Gunn, who's another youngster sitting there at 3.6. If he gets minutes, he's also particularly interesting to me for GPP purposes. On the Gulf Coast side, Dunk City here, they do have a pretty decent roster. They're coached by Pat Chambers, who was at Penn State for many years. This is second season here. Does bring on a couple of transfers. Dalian Johnson from Penn State, who Chambers originally a couple of years ago recruited to Penn State. Kashawn Kellman comes over from that Princeton team that made a second weekend tournament run. those guys are going to be inserted right away and be, valuable rotational players. The top returners from last year, Isaiah Thompson, Chase Johnson, and Zach Anderson. Those are the three top players. They are all priced accordingly. Johnson at 8.6, Thompson at 7.5, and Anderson at 6.4. Thompson would be the guy. I know he's labeled as day-to-day. If he plays 35, 38 minutes, like I think he will, he's an excellent GPP play against this Hoosiers team because I do think that they're going to be able to score on them to a degree. Anderson is a much better price as a 3 at 6.4, and he has a big-time upside, but in the grand scheme of things, more against his conference foes, against a Indiana front court that's going to have some size and some ruggedness and some physicality. I'm not so sure we can play Zach Anderson and without him fouling, 3 times in the first half. So I'm a little bit leery of that. Thompson would be my top there. Kelman's only 5.1 coming off of that Princeton team. It wasn't, a big time producer for them. 62% shooter from the field, contributed in all stat lines. I mean, he's a pretty solid option at 5.1. If he were to start, you could go there, but he's a little bit of a lower end option, right? And then Dalian Johnson at 3K. If he starts, there was a ton of 3K guys today. It was just, it didn't start out that way and they weren't locks, but as the starting lineups came out, we started to get a little more comfortable. We could take some of these 3K guys. So as starting lineups drop, we can kind of do the same thing again with this particular slate. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Mount St. Mary's versus Maryland. The Terps are 21-point favorites, 132 over and under total. The Mount St. Mary's squad, Dakota LaFew is their top player and really the only, to me, viable option here. 7.1, that's a tough price. I think we're probably going to be ignoring the Mount St. Mary's team here against a very tough and improved Maryland team that has a lot of continuity with their roster, and they add some very intriguing new pieces as well. But LaFew is the top guy there. For some reason, you feel you got to have somebody from their team. Maryland returning Jameer Young, that was huge. He's 8.5. Last year we got a bunch of 7K and 6.8 and like all these kind of lower tier prices for him. They go right at it with 8.5. He's certainly viable. He could put up 40 in this matchup. There's no doubt about that. So I definitely like him. Julian Reese showed a ton of maturation and improvement last year. I think we'll see him take another step further. Fouls are kind of the Achilles heel for Julian Reese. He gets a little aggressive even against teams that he doesn't need to, just needs to defend straight up, not get handsy, not body. I think at 7.6, he's an interesting GPP play. The cat's out of the bag after last year's performance, how good he can be. Not going to be catching anybody sleeping with him. I think he's fine at 7.6. Again, not a priority play, but if you fell into that as you need a forward, certainly looking at him as opposed to Dante Scott, who's been around forever. Still a fine play, but it's a little bit of a high price for me on Scott. Maryland does get from Indiana Jordan Geronimo, who is 4.3. That's an interesting price if we think he plays 20, 25 minutes. And then the kid they bring in, Deshaun Harris-Smith, who is a highly rated freshman, 6.5K, very, very strong price for him. I think ultimately maybe not so much this year, although he's going to be a key piece. If he comes back next year, we're talking about a kid who has like 9K potential with his performance after Jameer Young leaves. He's going to see kind of the weaker defender on the perimeter, typically playing next to Young. He's a very gifted scorer, and he can do a lot of different things. So Harris-Smith at 6.5 is certainly the Terp that we're going to want to look at and utilize in a bunch of our lineups here today and going forward. He's the one that I really like. All right, moving on to the next one here. We're going to keep marching on. Lemoyne versus Georgetown. Now, Georgetown, 18.5-point favorites. Kind of feels tough betting that for Georgetown, but it is Lemoyne. 145 total. That one is interesting. Georgetown going through a little bit of changes here, right? We'll start with Lemoyne. Top two players for them, Isaiah Salter and Luke Sutherland. Not a team that I'm going to be looking to attack too heavily. Again, if we end up with some, cheap starters that are 3K, 4-2, we can maybe potentially look there. Salter coming in at 6-3, and then Sutherland at 3-7. I do think Sutherland has playability, viability, however you want to phrase it, as a forward at 3-7 and a likely starter. And like I said, the top front court player on this Lemoyne team. Georgetown, they're not, while they may be improved, they're not going to be scaring me. There's going to be like they have to prove it situation. And looking up and down their roster, they have some solid pieces, but they're still not an elite tier team, and they're not going to shut anybody out. So I am looking at Sutherland there at 3-7 as a priority list type play if he starts, which I assume he will, and I expect him to. Looking at the new and I guess improved Georgetown Hoyas roster and team program. No more Pat Ewing. That's a step in the right direction. No disrespect to Pat Ewing, who was a great player and part of my childhood. Even played for my Sonics, if you can believe it. But Ed Cooley comes in. A lot of bad blood between the Providence fans and him. Maybe not from his side, but Providence fans really not happy with Cooley making this move. But I'm interested to see what he's able to do. This Georgetown roster: Primo Spears, Brandon Murray, Quetus Wahab, a Cook, Jordan Riley, Bradley Azuro, all gone. Have to basically turn the entire roster over. Does bring in Jaden Epps from Illinois, who has a lot of upside. Dontrez Styles from North Carolina, who never got an opportunity there, but will here. Ishmael Massoud, the journeyman of college basketball, coming in from Kansas State. Rowan Brumbaugh, who I like a lot, from Texas. And Supreme Cook from Fairfield, an elite name does Supreme Cook have. Cook was a 13.8.5 rebound per game player last year at Fairfield, going to operate in the front court for this team. Dontrez Styles, I think he has the ability to be a solid shooter and high usage guy on this particular roster. Epps, we know he can score a little bit. Jay Heath returns. We know from his past, and when he's healthy, he can absolutely score and take over a game and provide us with a little bit of secondary stats as well. The rest of the roster, guys like Wayne Bristol, Ryan Mutombo, not really viable or that intriguing for DFS purposes, but the Rowan Brumbaugh kid, who originally was going to go to Northwestern, backed out, decided to go to Texas, didn't get a role there because all these other guards in front of him, decides to go in and to a situation with Ed Cooley in Georgetown where he's probably going to play a lot. If anything we know about Ed Cooley, he keeps his rotations really thin, and he plays his starters an absolute F ton of time. So many, you can go dating back to like 2013, 2014 when Draft Street was a thing. Providence starters and when FanDuel had a really good CBB product, like you would just mini stack Providence each and every game because you knew they were all going to play most of the game. They barely ever subbed out their starters. Now, he's not quite that a level of not playing his bench, but looking up and down this Georgetown roster, it's going to be pretty lean. So you can imagine that a guy like Rowan Brumbaugh playing 30 plus minutes and getting to play through mistakes, knock on wood, is going to be a pretty interesting player this season and somebody that I think we can use. Kind of an old school type hooper who's going to be able to do some damage, and he's only 3-3. So he's certainly in the mix for our main lineups. This particular slate, while they kept it still stiffer for known names, known commodities, whatever, there is a lot of guys who are underpriced that we can use that are going to be starters under 4K. And that's going to make things a little dicey because if those hit, the slates are going to be higher scoring, but there are going to be a lot of, detonating bust type plays under 4K as well. So Brumbaugh is somebody I have my eye on. Dontrez Styles at 3-7, I also have my eye on. Jay Heath, a healthy Jay Heath at 6-9 is usable for sure, but I'm really looking at the cheap options here for Georgetown, and on the other side with Lemoyne with their guy Sutherland. All right. Next game we're going to talk about here, Stony Brook versus St. John's. The Johnnies are 18-point favorites, 142.5 total. Should have Stills here to talk about this one. He graduated from Stony Brook. I don't know if you guys knew that. And of course, is a big-time Johnnies fan. So talking about the Johnnies here, they had a couple of exhibition games. We'll talk about their first one in which they beat Rutgers 89-78. Pretty good game from St. John's there. Did go an extra period or two. Naheem Aline was fierce, hit 19 points on 4 triples, 13 attempts, 17 overall. Dennis Jenkins had 13 points, 9 assists. You love seeing that. Glenn Taylor, 13 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. Joel Soriano, who's going to be just an absolute monster for Coach Pitino, 12 points, 16 rebounds. You guys know what he's about from last year. Chris Ledlum, who originally was going to transfer to Tennessee, decides to come to St. John's. 11 points, 10 rebounds in that one. Drisa Traore, 8 points, 5 rebounds. Simeon Wilcher, who's going to be a big-time player as the season goes on. Just a youngster, pretty raw. 3 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. And Zubi Ejiofor, 6 points, 3 rebounds. Nobody else with relevant stat line there. Brady Dunlap didn't really play too much. Sean Conway didn't really play too much either. Then they followed that up with a game against Pace. And lost 63-59. So going from a really good, like, hey, it's exhibition. We don't have to read too much into it, but hey, we feel pretty damn good about this win, right? Over a Rutgers team. That's definitely solid. And then you turn around and you drop one exhibition to Pace, but it still makes people talk. It still makes people worry. That was a porous defensive effort. Pace's top player, Brian Powell, was just scoring at will against them. He had 22 real points, also had 10 rebounds. They had literally no answer for him, and that's a little bit scary because I really want this St. John's team to make the tournament, but I'm quickly feeling a little uneasy about this team just because it's going to take time, right? There's no continuity with this roster. They have 2 guys returning from a season ago. AJ Storr, letting AJ Storr walk is just, I heard an interview recently with Pitino, kind of shaking his head and trying to play that off, but I think they're really going to miss Storr. And then the other one was, I think he thought Walter Clayton was going to come from Iona and he didn't. So this team's kind of, thrown together with a lot of talent, but geez, I don't know, man. I don't know how it's going to work yet. In that game, Naheem Alim had another big game, 14 shot attempts, 22 points. Brady Dunlap got some minutes there, 21 minutes, 10 points, 3 rebounds. Ledlum had 12 rebounds. It is worth noting that Joel Soriano did not play in this one. Dennis Jenkins played, but he was not good in this one. Glenn Taylor barely played for some reason, and it was just overall a very peculiar game for St. John's altogether. Looking at it, they also didn't have Jordan Dingle, who's going to be a very important piece here, dealing with a shoulder issue, which is why he missed those exhibition games. Supposedly available for the first game. He's 9'3", comes into it because he was so spectacular in the Ivy League last year. Don't think I'm going to start the season rostering him at 9'3", especially with a shoulder issue, especially with a myriad of other guards and wings on this team. The pecking order to me seems like it might be a little tough to process here at first. We know Joel Soriano is going to be great, but we're paying almost $10K for him. That's tough. He will rock this Stony Brook front court for sure. And maybe have himself a pretty big, 35, 40 fantasy point floor. But there's an opportunity cost here, and we're going to have to really weigh if we want to have a studs and scrubs build, or we're going to rely on these 3K starters, or do we want to go a little bit more balanced, which wasn't a bad play on day one. Looking at Naheem Alim, he's 3'8". I do foresee him drawing a decent chunk of ownership just because he's cheap and people are going to see how well he did in the exhibition game, but you have to really apply this and say, well, here's the reason why he played those extra minutes. Here's the reason why he had those extra usage, because of Jordan Dingle not playing. And obviously in the second game, Soriano not playing as well. Obviously, he brought Aline in to take shots, help kind of bring this roster together. I think he's fine at 3'8". He's certainly main team viable because there's a chance he could start again, and there is a chance that he'll just end up playing 20, 25 minutes regardless if he starts or not. Other guys who are relatively cheap on this roster, the Dunlaps, the Conways, Cruz Davis, like probably just wait and see with the rest of those guys and see what this actual pecking order is going to be. And for that matter, Glenn Taylor at 5'6", who ordinarily would be a really good play. I think we probably got to wait and see on him. Dennis Jenkins at 8'7", probably going to wait and see on him. And then Chris Ledlum at over 9K at 9'2", because he put up almost 40 in his last program. But again, different role, different team, just a lot of different mouths to feed. And I don't know how this pecking order is going to shake out. So I foresee a lot of cannibalization where The perimeter and the wing players end up pushing themselves to like a 2.5, 3x number at these prices at most. And until it starts to adjust, we're probably just looking at Soriano or nobody, or potentially a lean if he starts, right? So that's kind of how I'm handling St. John's at this moment in time. The Stony Brook group, because I think St. John's is going to give up points, even though they've got some pieces here that, theoretically they should be better on defense. I do look at this Stony Brook roster and feel like, hey, we can play some pieces. It's going to be another one where we need to see the starting lineup, though. 3 different players, which would have been likely the 3 best players on Stony Brook last year, and upperclassmen, all went down early with injuries. That's Sabry Phillip, Dean Knoll, and Aaron Clark. All of them come into this game 3K. DK even throws a questionable tag on all of them. Sounds like a pretty good opportunity for all of them to play, at least Knoll and Clark, from what I've read. Imagining that they do start, either one of those guys is in play. Any of the 3, really. Looking at it, because of those injuries, their best player did end up being Tyler Stevenson Moore, who I do believe is a conference preseason second teamer, 7'3". The other player that really stepped up for them last year, Andre Snoddy, who has guard forward eligibility, he's 7'2". A little bit higher prices on those guys. They're certainly GPP viable, especially if any combination of Phillip, Knoll, and Clark is out. But assuming they're all back, the starting lineup shakes out with Clark. He's the one that I'm probably looking at the most and I feel the most confident in. But again, we're going to have to wait and see how it shakes out for this actual Stony Brook starting lineup. There is some viability with these cheap guys here. We're starting to push into the studs and scrubs category with these options, but it just makes too much sense, right? And looking at it, they do lose one of their other better players from last year, Frankie Palesia, who 25% shot rate, 35% three-point shooter, 26% rebounding rate. So there's a pretty big hole in their lineup. These other 3 that are coming back from injuries are going to have to be tasked with sliding right back in there and being ready to go. So that's where my head is at with the Stony Brook group at this moment in time. Next game here, Vanderbilt versus the Presbyterian Blue Hose. Vanderbilt 17.5 point favorites. The total is 139. I think we'll start with Presbyterian here. The top players from their win over Carolina Christian in their exhibition game, Kobe Stewart, who scored 17 points, 6 of 7 from the field. Jonah Pierce scored 16 points, shooting 7 of 7. And then Houston Jones shot 4 of 4. Crosby James, 4 of 5 from long range. All of those guys putting up about 12 points each. And then Jalen Peterson, also 4 of 4 from the field, scored 11 points. So a very deep game for Presbyterian there in that one. Looking at the Presbyterian group playing against Vanderbilt, I would tend to shy away. I might put a little too much stock into playing, Vanderbilt, a team on the road against Vanderbilt. They tend to struggle with their shooting. I do think Stewart at 6'4" makes a lot of sense there if you want a GPP target against this Vanderbilt team. Crosby James at 4'4" as a likely starter. That makes a lot of sense as well. But Presbyterian's just not a team that we're going to be prioritizing here. It's just more of a GPP look. I think they could actually struggle here against Vanderbilt to the point where I don't want to be too exposed to a group like that. On the Vanderbilt side, they've lost some pieces, but they do return Ezra Mannion. Obviously Tyron Lawrence, who looked like he was going to transfer out. They do bring in Van Allen Lubin from Notre Dame, who has a ton of upside, really intriguing player that I think is going to be a big-time factor for this Vanderbilt team. Looking at how Notre Dame struggled in the first half against Niagara, Notre Dame and the Ville are going to be 2 really horrible teams in the ACC. They could have really used Van Allen Lubin to stay there. Looking at some of his efficiency as a freshman on limited minutes, high fantasy point per minute player, 19% shot rate, 20% usage rate, 30% combined rebounding rate, a block rate over 5%, was a fouler. That tends to happen with very athletic freshman players. But I really like him. Would have preferred slightly cheaper, even though I am over here, cheerleading and hooting and hollering about this tighter pricing. 6.5 for him. It's definitely a gut punch. I want to catch people slipping on a player like Van Allen Lubin, but there could be a lot of damage done to our lineups if he doesn't pan out at 6.5. He doesn't get the minutes, or he just ends up committing a bunch of dumb fouls. GPP play for sure. They also have Evan Taylor, who they're bringing in a transfer from the Patriot League, 7.6. That's a pretty steep price. Tassos Kamataros at 6.8. He's going to have a pretty nice year for this team, or at least have the opportunity to do so. But at 6.8, that's a pretty steep price. We do have Colin Smith, who is primed for another step forward at 4.2. And then Lee Dort at 3.2. If Dort were to jump into a starting, the starting lineup, or perhaps a GPP value, but I do expect Dort to play a bigger role on this team, and he's somebody who is extremely talented and can definitely make that next step forward. But overall, Vanderbilt and Presbyterian, that game, I feel a little uneasy about it. Not that Vanderbilt's going to lose, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit more low scoring than maybe even Vegas thinks. So that's one that I'm kind of keeping off to the side, not too excited about, not really planning to play more than one piece from that one in each lineup. And I would not feel bad about ignoring it completely, just so that we're on the same page there. All right, next game we're going to talk about is North Dakota versus Iowa. Iowa on the slate. Now, the good thing about Iowa, their football team, awful when it comes to offense. They have the lowest totals in the world, but typically Iowa basketball plays an extremely fantasy-friendly brand of basketball, and we can definitely get behind them, stacking them for and against each and every slate. 19-point favorites against North Dakota. You have a total of 153. So compare that to the 139 of Vanderbilt, and you can see the contrasting styles at play there. I think the under 139 in the Vanderbilt game is actually in play, and I think the over 153 in Iowa is in play as well. Iowa, we love Iowa. They are a fun team. They have a hilarious coach who just gets so angry all the time. We've been through it with Iowa. Luka Garza, had a great career. He was a kid that his last year, we started kind of fading him as chalk, a couple seasons ago, his senior season. And there's always seemingly a super chalky Iowa player that emerges each season. Looking at their exhibition game against Quincy, in which they threw up over 100 points, the starting lineup they rolled with DeSante Bowen, who had 6 points, 6 rebounds in 19 minutes. Tony Perkins, 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists in 23 minutes. Peyton Sandford, 13 points, 4 rebounds in 23 minutes. Patrick McCaffrey, 16 and 3 in 23 minutes. And then Ben Krikke, the Valpo transfer, 14.7 rebounds, 2 assists in 25 minutes. They're really excited about Ben Krikke. He's somebody they're going to rely on heavily, and he's going to take a big-time offensive role on this team immediately. They do bring in Price Sandford as well, so they got the Sandford brothers, Peyton and Price. Price looked good, hit 4 of his triples, 12 points in that one. And then Josh Dix had 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists off the bench. So looking at Iowa here immediately and prices, Perkins is very expensive at 8.3. I don't mind the 7.7 on Krikke. That could be problematic for some, but he steps into a situation here where he's going to be playing a very, very different brand of basketball than he played at Valpo. He's going to have the opportunity to get a ton of shots down low. He's going to be their primary rebounder. Foul is obviously a risk with a player like this, but he can block shots. And I just feel like 7.7, while it's a little on the high side, we're probably looking at a guy that's going to be able to clear 35 fantasy points per game this season. I'm pretty bullish on Ben Krikke. Sandford at 7K is a little bit pricey. You can get away with Patrick McCaffrey at 6.3. You do have Bronze at 4.6, who's another transfer. He seems okay. Interested in Price Sandford at 3.5 there, depending on, role. Not going to start, but somebody that we can use or keep in our player pool for GPP value. And then Josh Dix, who, if, Iowa ends up blowing their doors off, we could see a nice little game from Dix off the bench where he could theoretically score 20 fantasy points at 3.3. So keep that in mind. And DeSante Bowen, who started that exhibition game sitting there at 3.2. It's almost a detriment to start if you're that fifth starter, as they say, because he's not going to get usage and shots over the other four on the floor. It's almost better to come off the bench like Evan Bronze, Josh Dix, Price Sandford. So keep that in mind there. But obviously a starter at 3-2, that's pretty hard to get away from there, especially if we're looking for value, and we certainly are. Let's see. I had a box for Northern Iowa. Here it is. All right. So Northern or no, I don't have it for North Dakota. What am I talking about? There it is. Okay. I have a box score for North Dakota. They scored 107 in their exhibition game against mighty Northland, who they held to 48 points. The starting lineup that they rolled with: Tisatne Tishisard, don't make me say that one again. I try to practice these beforehand, but that's the best I got on that one. Eli King, Dang Mare, Trayson Eaglestaff, strong name, and BJ Omat. BJ Omat had 25 points, 5 rebounds. Eaglestaff had 15. Mayer had 11, and Eli King had 9 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist. This North Dakota team, I think there are guys worthy of being in main team consideration because of the matchup and the amount of points that I'm expecting to be scored. The Bison are going through some changes, but obviously losing Grant Nelson, that's a big deal, and Luke Yoder. But I think looking at what they're going to – oh, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. God, I need to get some sleep. They did not lose Grant Nelson, because we're not talking about North Dakota State. We're talking about North Dakota. The Fighting Hawks, not the Bison. Okay. I'm here. I'm with you. All right. They did lose 3 of their top 4 scorers, but I digress. Eli King transfers in from Iowa State. Tyree and Hanchow transfers in from James Madison. Eli King's still young. Tons of upside playing in a conference like this on a North Dakota team where they're, probably not expected to do too much in the Summit, but I think he could have a high usage and be a really solid play. So I do like Eli King quite a bit in this particular matchup, especially when you consider the fact that he's only 3K. And I am expecting him to start. So we have another 3K starter on our plate here. Omat, who had the best exhibition, is 6'2". That's a reasonable price for him in a matchup like this. He can be used in a main lineup situation. I am not going to use Tisatne at 7'9", even though I think he's fine. And then Eaglestaff at 5'6" is the only other one that I could see being potentially main team viable, just based off of the exhibition, his numbers from the prior season, and what the beat writers are saying about this North Dakota team. So really, we got a 3K option in Eli King and a 3K option in Dang Mare, who also started in that exhibition against Iowa. I will take the cheaper guys against Iowa. I do think they'll produce 4X plus, and there's potential for a lot more there too for a guy like Eli King. All right, let's move back on to the next one here. We have Northern Iowa versus North Texas. What happened is I have all these tabs in front of me, and I've got Iowa next to Northern Iowa, and I got North Texas next to North Dakota, yellow, green. So I got myself confused. So in case you're wondering if I'm okay, I am. Just went a little colorblind there, I guess. All right, so the line here for this one, and this is a game that is a very low total as well, as can be imagined with the way that North Texas typically plays, even though they've had a lot of changes. They have different coaching staff, different players. However, the total is 131. North Texas 4.5-point favorites coming into this one. Let's look at Northern Iowa first in the exhibition game in which they scored 103 points against Co. Titan Anderson, he is going to be one of the most intriguing players on this roster. He had 17 and 10. Bowen Bourne, who we are very familiar with from last year, had 14 points. Jacob Hudson, 14 points. Nate Heiss, 7 points, 3 assists. And Michael Duox, who did very little, but he was the 5th starter. As far as the bench pieces, Landon Wolf, Kyle Pack, interesting. They stand together, they'll be the Wolf Pack. BJ Taylor and Cole Henry. So really looking at Northern Iowa, there are two that stand out, and they're both super expensive, right? Titan Anderson, 8.2. That's a little tough. He's certainly going to be good. Comes with guard forward eligibility. I love my multi-position, guys, because it gives me that flexibility to really do what I want and play at a guard and a forward slot if I want to. And then Bowen Bourne, who tortured us at times last year, produced very well at other times, 7.4. It's a reasonable price for him. North Texas is a team that I do. Obviously, they're going to be a lot different. They don't have Tyler Perry. They don't have their same coach with McCaslin. They're going to be a lot different. But I still don't feel like we jump into playing guys against them yet until we really see what their new coach, Ross Hodge, is going to be about. And they could definitely, and they will, take a step back to a degree, because you don't lose Tyler Perry, Kai Huntsberry, Tyree Eady, Abu Asman, and Jaden Martinez and just shake it off. Now, they did hit the transfer portal hard, and they bring in some pieces that are going to be relevant for this team. Rondell Walker from TCU, Robert Allen from Ole Miss, John Buggs from UTSA, and CJ Nolan from Oklahoma. So some high major talent coming in. They also have Aaron Scott returning. They also have Reuben Jones returning. Those are two key pieces from a season ago. Aaron Scott, a kind of versatile jack of all trades type. Reuben Jones, a volume 3-point shooter, not the most efficient player in the world, but he can definitely put up fantasy points. So looking at the North Texas box, they did have an exhibition game. Was it against the Bearcats of Sam Houston? The starters in that one were Reuben Jones, John Buggs, Aaron Scott, CJ Nolan, and Mulai Sissoko. Mulai Sissoko, really never rosterable. He's a fouling machine, and he just isn't going to play any minutes. He does play that fifth starter role, but he ends up ceding work to the top bench player, which at times might be Robert Allen, or it might be Jason Edwards, who had a really nice game, 16 points, 4 rebounds. Aaron Scott had 9, 3, and 1 with 2 blocks. Buggs had 9 points, knocked down 3 triples, and Reuben Jones had a very nice game, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals. Robert Allen had 8 and 9. He was going nuts in that one. Rondell Walker did not play. He doesn't have a decision on the waiver as of like an hour ago when I looked. So we're in another situation like we were with Femi Odekale. I don't expect him to have a decision in time, which is unfortunate. If he did and got to play at 3-4, he would obviously be a very solid option and somebody that we could look to. Looks like because of him not being eligible yet, CJ Nolan would get that starting spot. At least he did in their exhibition and some of the scrimmages I saw. He does check in at 3-4 as well. So Nolan is somebody that, as a starter, we have a cheap option here. Now, it might seem like, damn, why are we having all these sub 4K options? This is going to be a really terrible slate for us because it's going to be stars and scrubs. And I've kind of trained myself and others to hate stars and scrubs, but it's not as bad as you think, because I'm going to tell you right now, 75% or more of those sub 4K priced players are they're not going to do anything. Even if they start and play 25 to 30 minutes, there's going to be a lot of fit bidding going on. So don't worry too much about that. Worry about it too. Like, you don't want to pick the wrong one. Yes, we have to worry about that, but don't think that, oh my God, there's going to be 5, 6, 7 sub 4K players who all get 6x or more. This slate's going to be 300 points. What are we going to do? It's not going to be like that. I would be very, very shocked to see that. There are going to be some, but not like 8, 900, 20. It's just going to be a reasonable amount. Because CJ Nolan is not striking me as somebody who's going to step in there and put up a 30. But he's viable because he's going to play 20 plus minutes as a starter. Aaron Scott is the top option, but he's the highest priced at 7K. So I'm not really giving you any super intriguing information there. I apologize. I do look at Robert Allen at 4.9, though, as a guy who could do some damage here in this matchup. And if his minutes are solidified as a 25-minute guy off the bench, he has real viability there, even as a non-starter. All right, next game is UNC Asheville versus Michigan. might surprise you that the Michigan Wolverines are only 11.5-point favorites against Asheville, 142 over under. Coming in, Asheville has some players who might be interesting to some of you. And maybe that's why Michigan is not bigger favorites. You'd think against Asheville, a team that, was solid last year, but struggled against Tier A competition, would not necessarily be that little of an underdog. And, maybe plus 11.5 is live. They do bring in a couple of transfers here. NC State, Greg Gant, who's been around the way, Providence as well. VCU transfer Josh Banks and Evan Johnson from Georgia State. They do lose Tyjon Jones, who was a 15-point per game scorer. That certainly hurts, but they do bring back a kid who you may have heard of, might be decent enough. Big South Player of the Year, Drew Pember, who had a ton of offers to transfer out, NIL, out the wahoo. They had opportunities to play professionally overseas. There were lots of different opportunities for Drew Pember to play elsewhere. And he decided that he thought it was a good idea, or, I can't blame him, to stay at the Asheville and just kind of style on everybody, right? So gotta love Pember here. 8-9 is a really solid price for him, but it is a tough situation to go against Michigan, on the road. However, this Michigan team does not scare anyone. There is going to be an opportunity for them to potentially be very, very bad. Looking at their roster, and I'll tell you about it, then you'll see why. So if you want to play Pember, I didn't. We faded him in the tournament game against UCLA because he had struggled against Tier A competition. He was super chalky because of how many points he was putting up in his conference games. He ended up with 22 against UCLA and a total bust at like 40%. So that might make people kind of jump off him. So now we're going the opposite direction here and kind of wanting to play Pember against Michigan at potentially lower rostership. So I am looking at him for sure. You have Greg Gant sitting there at 3.5, somebody who, if jumps into the starting rotation immediately, he's at least interesting, gives us a little bit of value. But otherwise, we just have to make that decision if we want to play Pember. Everyone else, like McMullen at 6'6", Johnson at 5'8", feels priced slightly too high or right about where they should be. Although with Tyjon Jones gone, there are opportunities for a perimeter player to step up, whether that's Burgess, Johnson, AB, one of those guys. The Michigan side, they did have a injury in their exhibition game to Doug McDaniel. Sounds like he's going to be fine and play through it, but it's obviously worth talking about, or at least, being aware of, like, hey, why isn't Doug McDaniel playing? Oh, that's right. He got hurt in the exhibition game. So I don't expect him to miss time over it, but it is on the table. Had 16 points and three assists in their exhibition win over Northwood. Before that, Namari Burnett, who's timeless, hit 3 threes, 9 points, played 26 minutes. Burnett's going to be that guy that just tortures me, right? Remember how often I tried to get us on Burnett, and he would get those minutes for Bama, and he just couldn't make the shots, and he couldn't quite get over the hump, even though he has all this talent, struggles to stay healthy. I love a sub 5K Namari Burnett. Lucky for us, he's 5'3", which is a cutoff point for me, so I don't have to be super interested in him. And especially after the 26 minutes where he had 6 assists, he was super active. He looked good, but it was Northwood. Terrence Williams had 7 points, 5 rebounds. Oliver Mkwa had 11, 8, and 6, flirted with a triple-double, 3 blocks and a steal. Mkwa is going to be a big-time player for this Michigan team. And then Terrace Reed, who had a game last year as the Posh Play of the Day, by the way, where he absolutely smacked 13 points, 10 rebounds, 3 steals in this game against Northwood. I'm talking about when he smacked as the Posh Play of the Day last year, by the way. Somebody to look at. Off the bench, Trey Jackson scored 20 points. Look out, hit 3 threes there. And then the only other relevant bench pieces was Will Schwetter, who played 22 minutes, had 7 points, 13 rebounds. don't expect him to do that all that often. More of a role player. And then George Washington III, who was really solid, played 25 minutes, 7 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block, and 1 steal. Filled it up there, took 12 shots. Only made 3 of them, but a lot of volume there for the kid. So Mqua is underpriced for this matchup, 7.5. It's where we learned today, mid-balance, our mid-range options who, maybe in their prior team, like 7.5 would maybe borderline too high for them. But we got to look at this Michigan team. No Hunter Dickinson, starved for a front court player that can get it done in a similar manner to Dickinson. Mqua is going to be very improved. I know you're not going to look at him as this Dickinson type player or profile because of how he played at Tennessee, but he is going to be a lot different looking. I think you'll be surprised how efficient and how good he is in the Michigan uniform. So we are looking at him at 7.5 as a main team guy, borderline core play, honestly. Terrace Reed at 3.6 as a starter. Terrace Reed at 3.6, absolutely. Sign me up for that. Love Terrace Reed. Let me go back and see. It was the Michigan State game. I think it was Sparty was struggling against front court players, you may remember. And what did he do? 10 rebounds, 30 points. That's right, at 3.6. We had Terrace Reed that day. Got with the DFS gods as my witness. So 3.6 for him playing big minutes as a starter. Hell yes. Terrence Williams at 4.8 is also pretty decent of a value play. And then Trey Jackson at 4.1, who has just been stuck as a historical role player at Seton Hall, will get the opportunity to add more. If Jalen Llewellyn still needs, after the injury last year, still needs significant time to get back into the fold. Doug McDaniel being banged up, they will rely on Trey Jackson to take more shots. And we saw it in that exhibition game, what that role might look like for him. And then GPP wise, the George Washington kid, certainly like him. The Jace Howard is going to be out after a stress fracture too, so they're a little shorthanded at the guard spots, which gives George Washington a little bit of an opportunity and gives Trey Jackson to play on the perimeter a little bit more, especially on this Michigan team that has 2 or 3 legitimate front court options that will prevent Jackson from having to play out of position as much. So I like Michigan here. I like Mqua. I like Terrace Reed, Trey Jackson. Might be a situation that arises where we can play 2 of these guys in our main and feel pretty good about it. And then on the other side, running it back with a Drew Pember type if we can make that fit. Hey, what's up, Ariel? Good to see you, my man, and on play. Yeah, glad we're back too. Hopefully you enjoyed the games tonight and you had yourself at least a good day. If you didn't, at least if you had a good time and you enjoyed it and then you felt good about basketball being back, that's we'll take that. All right, moving on to the next game here. We're cruising right along. We have Florida A&M, the Rattlers versus Creighton. Creighton is a 30-point favorite. That's tough. 136 over under. Let's just jump right into Creighton's box against Wayne State in their exhibition. Steve Ashworth, who comes over to be the leader, the guard for this team with Ryan Nembhard gone, had 12 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. He's going to be a guy who can shoot threes for them, fits right into their offensive play style. Ryan Kalkbrenner only played 19 minutes, but he had 4 blocks, 4 rebounds, 7 points, and 2 assists. I will caution about Kalkbrenner, not as a DFS play. He's going to be fine. But you might remember early in the season, Kalkbrenner had these rebound props, 5.5, 6.5. I think he even had like a 4.5 once. And he's never got them. So looking at Kalkbrenner, you think, man, this guy, he's tall. He bangs down low. He's a capable player. Just doesn't rebound like he should. Maybe he changes that this year, but I'm gonna be looking at some Kalkbrenner props, and I'm gonna be tempted. So maybe I'm saying that to remind myself and not you guys. But Kalkbrenner rebounding props are a trap. I promise you. Trey Alexander, 22 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists in 18 minutes. Trey Alexander is going to be phenomenal. Absolutely amazing year coming up for Trey Alexander. Mason Miller, the dreaded 5th starter. That's gonna be my thing this year. I'm gonna be, I always like to have these little phrases. The 5th starter, very negative connotation around that. That's what Mason Miller is. Baylor Shireman, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. Shireman can shoot 3. Shireman can rebound at a very high level. And then Jonathan Lawson off the bench, 12 points, 5 rebounds. A lot of chatter on Creighton boards about how Lawson looks and how he's going to be a big-time factor. I like the idea of putting Lawson off the bench as the first sub instead of inserting him in as that 5th starter, because again, there's not a lot of usage to go around when you have Baylor, you have Trey, you have Ryan and Steve. Sounds like a boy band. There isn't going to be a lot of usage for Jonathan Lawson there. So having him come in the second unit or the first sub off makes a ton of sense and actually increases his DFS viability for me. Still have Francisco Farabello. He's still not doing much of anything in the exhibition in 13 minutes. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists. Didn't have any points. He's really not going to contribute a whole lot. And Frederick King, who we know has major upside, but until Kalkbrenner graduates and leaves, he's or gets hurt or gets mono again, King's just not going to be relevant. And then they do bring in from Virginia Isaac Trout, who I think will be a solid bench piece for them. Whether or not he is a worthwhile DFS option remains to be seen. He is 3-2, but I don't think we're looking at him too much. Starting at the bottom, working our way up, Johnny Lawson at 3-7, absolutely like that. I think against FAMU, we can. I hate playing the blowout angle because it hurts you more than it doesn't, because what happens? The team underperforms, the blowout doesn't happen, or because of the way that resumes work, numbers work, net rankings work, these guys have to beat the pants off some of these teams, and you end up seeing starters play a lot more. And we saw it all the time last year. Oh, they're not going to play past the 10-minute mark. It's like, well, you don't watch college basketball if you think that, because those starters are going to play down to the last 3-4 minutes. That typically happens a lot. However, Creighton had a distinct lack of bench last year. They have more depth this year, certainly, but I think this is a spot where Creighton is going to want to show off their bench a little bit more, and they're not going to have to play those starters 38 minutes in a blowout game. So it certainly hurts Kalkbrenner, who is 9-8. I'm way more comfortable paying like $8K for him like we usually do. Baylor Shireman at $9K is a guy that I think I'm fine with if you do want to pay that price. Ashworth at 8-2 is fine, but Trey Alexander is my favorite play on this team at 8-1. Absolute of any of those 4 pay-ups, Alexander's the one that I would be most focused on. And then Lawson, who at 3-7, like I said, very strong play. Looking at him playing approximately 17 to 22 minutes perhaps off the bench. Maybe he gets the last 5-minute blowout run where he's the guy taking all the usage. He has so much upside in that spot. So look at Lawson there. And Trey Alexander as my primary 2 favorite guys from this Creighton team, at least on slate number 1. The FAMU squad, Florida A&M, they have a lot to not really care too much about. This is going to be a team that remains and has historically been very balanced. The one name to bring up is Love Bettis. Love Bettis kind of comes in as the predicted alpha high usage bucket getter for this team. So expect him to, regardless of how the game goes, he's going to take a ton of shots. They have approximately 30-ish points to replace from last year. Love Bettis was a player at North Carolina A&T in his last destination before he transferred in. Now you're going to look at his box from last year and you're going to be like, what do you mean this guy's going to score a lot? He didn't really score too much there, but he is a long-range gunner, shot about 40% during his time there. And he's just somebody who is going to get a ton of usage. There's a lot of shots available on this FAMU team, and he's just the player that seems the most likely to get it and the one that the coaching staff has talked up the most. And I did make sure to go around reading Florida A&M literature to make that determination and find that information for you. So he is the guy that I'm looking at. He was a big time player at the JUCO level. And we've seen some JUCO kids who have been able to produce at the D1 level. So I think we see that kid Bettis shoot like 15 times in this game. And if that's something that interests you at 3.8, as it should, put him in your player pool. If those shots aren't falling, I don't think he'll do enough of anything else. But if they are, he will easily have enough volume to knock the dust off that 3.8 price tag. All right, we're moving on to the last two games here. We are cruising right along. Auburn versus Baylor, one of our few non-super mega blowout games. Very competitive. Baylor, 2-point favorites, 143 total. Give me all of that. I love Auburn. I usually do. I love the way Bruce Pearl operates. I love how this offense is. There are a few players who are nicked up, banged up. Janai Broom, who is our guy, he's dealing with a shoulder issue. Please believe he isn't going to miss any time. He'll be there against Baylor. Having that first game banged up in an important part of the body, that does worry me about paying that 9.4 price tag for him. It does take him out of main team consideration for me as well. Normally, I am one of the few in the industry who's like, yeah, I'll pay $9K for Broom. This guy's phenomenal. I love Broom and the way he plays, but I am definitely being cautious with him. Aiden Holloway, the youngster, he's dealing with an ankle issue, but he's going to play from what I have been reading. He's 5'1". There was another player today that was 5'1" that would operate in a similar role that I think Aiden Holloway will. If you give me a chance to remember that, who that was, I think if I just need some more time to figure that out. Chance Moore, that's who it was. I think Aiden Holloway could play like a Chance Moore in this matchup, and he's going to take a ton of shots. They do have a lot of shot takers on this roster. Of course, high usage player like Katie Johnson, who I think will draw some attention at 4.8. Denver Jones, who was a very strong player at FIU a year ago at 7K. And then they do have the Chaney Johnson kid at 4K, who is a GPP special. He is a Mighty Mouse type of a player who is going to be a very high usage guy as well. Looking at it, Jalen Williams at 7.2, I think is a fine play as well. If Broom were to miss, Williams becomes priority number one. I don't think that's going to happen. We saw Jalen Williams improve a ton last year. The fact that he returns for his final year with Broom solidifies the front court. Broom doing the dirty work down low, and Williams being more of the jumper, step out Euro type game where he can score at all three levels and also rebound at a fairly high level as well. Auburn did have a exhibition game where they scored 102 points. This offense can get it done in a hurry. Also, a player to look at is Trey Donaldson, who sits there at 3.2. Might be a little bit of a brick price there by DK. Donaldson in 22 minutes during their exhibition, 4 points, but he had 3 steals, 8 assists. He is going to be the table setter, and he is going to be one of their better on-ball defenders. So even if he's not a big-time scorer at that price tag, he doesn't need to be. He can do enough in those secondary categories to pay off. Broom played 3 minutes because of the shoulder issue, so nothing there on the stat line. Chris Moore, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Chris Moore did start. If he were to start again, you look over here at his price. He is 3.5 on DK, so there you go. Chaney Johnson did start, not catching anyone by surprise, I guess. 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and a steal. I really like Chaney Johnson, man, the way he plays. Auburn saw him in action a year or two ago in one of their exhibition games, and he was scoring at will against their defense. And this was their year or two ago defense, right, on the perimeter, some solid options. And he was just doing whatever he wanted. Denver Jones, 18 points. He's going to be a big-time bucket getter for this team. 4 of 8 from downtown. That's going to be his role. They did bring Jalen Williams off the bench there, 11 and 6, 4 blocks, 2 steals. You see what I mean there with his peripherals. He will be the one to start. I would be really shocked if he didn't. That would just be kind of silly, but we'll see what happens there. And then Chad Baker, who transfers in, had 15 points, 3 rebounds, a block, and a steal. Baker has experience from the Mountain West and the non-D1 level. And Dylan Cardwell had 9 points, 4 steals. He is their kind of enforcer, right? So he's going to come in, he's going to rebound, he's going to get fouls, he's going to do a little bit of everything. He's pretty cheap at 3.8, but he's not really a DFS option here for me. So looking at it, Chaney Johnson at 4K, yes. Trey Donaldson at 3-2, yes. KD Johnson did not play in the exhibition. So, if he were to sit out, neither did Aiden Holloway, of course, that would make a big difference in just how viable Donaldson and Chaney Johnson would be. Now, even if KD and Holloway do play, Donaldson's not going to go away. He's too good. He's and he also doesn't need to have shots to be effective in this lineup like somebody like Denver Jones does. So he won't go away. He's probably your most viable value there at 3-2. We'll see what that starting lineup ends up shaking out to be. Chaney Johnson doesn't start, then it's a little bit of a GPP more play to me. If he does start, then he is absolutely a main team, and I would lean towards playing Johnson and Donaldson together in my primary build there, depending on how that starting lineup shakes out and what happens with Holloway. If Holloway plays and starts, then he becomes a main team play at 5-1. All right, Baylor. They have Ray J. Dennis coming in from Toledo, big time, everything. 9.1's pretty steep, but it's a good matchup. It's a good tempo. The spot is on paper great, but that's really a high price. Jacob Walter, the freshman coming in, who has a questionable tag on DK, but I don't foresee him missing. 8-9, that's a real steep price to have to pay immediately. Jalen Bridges, who tortures us with really high upside games, then follows it up with clangers. 8-1, that's pretty tough. Jaden Nunn at 6-4, we like that. We can deal with that. I think he's super viable. You have Langston Love at 4-9. He's viable. And then you have Everyday Jonathan Chamwa. Nail that name every time. Feels good. At 5-5. A healthy Everyday John, he is going to be a much bigger factor this year. I think people are kind of missing that and overlooking him. Granted, he might not be fully healthy ever again, which would be a shame, but if he is, he's going to be a big-time force. Miro Little, another young player coming in at 3-9. He has GPP viability written all over him. And then Caleb Lohner at 3-3, who played such a different position than he played at BYU last year. He didn't have a lot of success in year one with Baylor, but it sounds like he's learned this new role, accepted it, and he's going to be a bigger factor for Baylor this year. So I think we could see Lohner's production return to that BYU level. And not be such a scrub as most of the industry affectionately called him. So 3-3 Caleb Lohner, also a value for GPPs, certainly. The most competitive game on the slate. We want multiple pieces, yes. All right, last game on the slate, Purdue Fort Wayne versus DePaul. DePaul 12.5-point favorites. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's 143.5 total. I don't know that DePaul should be 12.5 favorites over anyone. Shouldn't be the 12.5-point favorites over the local YMCA team, let alone another D1 team. So might be a betting opportunity there for you to take Fort Wayne. Let's start with DePaul and see what they have, because they've got a bunch of key returners, some newer players. The starting five that we're most likely to see, at least what we saw in the exhibition against North Park, in which they beat North Park by 11 points, by the way. Would not have covered 12.5 against North Park, which is non-D1. They're supposed to cover 12.5 against a real D1 program. Okay. So Chico Carter, Jaden Henley, Deshaun Nelson, Caleb Murphy, come on, let's go, and Jeremiah Oden. Chico Carter is going to be a high usage guy. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. 6.6 assists, a block, and a steal. Jaden Henley, who is going to be, he was with Minnesota, showed flashes. I think he's going to be that next, really good DePaul guard for fantasy purposes. Don't know that he's going to impact wins by any means, but there's always one guard on DePaul that we're able to just run out there repeatedly and do so well with. After watching him have 11.6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, I already thought he had a chance to have a breakout year, but I'm completely convinced after that. And I know it's just an exhibition game, but when you look at the rest of this DePaul roster, you're gonna see a bare ass cupboard, and you're gonna say, you know what, I can get behind Jaden Henley as well. Deshaun Nelson played 12 minutes. He fouled out in 12 minutes. It's 16 points. So Nelson's probably going to have a big statistical season as well. My man, Caleb Murphy, who I kept on trying to remind everyone, hey, at USF, this guy could ball. This guy could play. Never got going in a DePaul uni just yet. Had 4 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. Looks like he's going to be a starter, though. So Murphy is certainly going to have his day again. It just might take a little bit longer than we want. Jeremiah Odin as a starter, 36 minutes, played him a ton in that exhibition, 15 points and 6 rebounds coming in from Wyoming. Elijah Fisher scored 22 points off the bench in 32 minutes. Churchill Abbas, very, very little impact on the game. KT Ramey, very little impact on the game. These are younger players. And it really just came down to the starting 5 plus Elijah Fisher off the bench. They basically rolled a 6-man rotation. Keandre Young played 20 minutes, so make it 7-man rotation, but he did very little as well. He stood around Fitbit and missed 4 3-pointers. So looking at the DePaul prices, Henley sticks out like a sore thumb, 4.3K. You are getting the sense at this point that this slate has some misprices on it. So the nice thing is the misprices are with options that carry a lot of bust potential. They're not with Ryan Kalkbrenner. Like we're not getting a 4K Ryan Kalkbrenner, talent. So yes, there's some misprices here, but at least they're not with that type of player. Although Jaden Henley could be really good. He also comes with guard forward eligibility, so we get to cheat and use a guard in our forward slot. So Jaden Henley, come on down. You are a priority core play number 1. Not going to have many lineups without you, my good sir. Caleb Murphy in at 4.7. Like him for GPPs. Nobody's going to roster him because of how horrible he was last year. But let's pull up his KenPom page just because I think at this point you guys are starting to just think that season that Caleb Murphy was good never happened, and I promise you it did. He was injured a lot last year. All right, so at South Florida for 2 seasons, 26% shot rate, 25% usage rate, couldn't shoot threes a lick, still can't shoot threes a lick, but that's okay, Caleb. 60% free throw shooter, not great. 40% field goal shooter, we can live with that, but his assist rate almost 30% in 2 years at South Florida. So he can set the table, he can get some shots off, he can get volume. Played an awfully lot of minutes at South Florida. In 2021, he played the 5th most in the conference, and he had a very high shot rate that year as well. So I like Caleb Murphy. I think GPPs, because I just don't want to miss the Caleb Murphy game when it happens, right? Like fully fading him when he finally does break out, because he is going to have a game where he shatters and people are going to be like, huh, wow, okay, I didn't see that happening. And I don't want to miss that. He's probably not going to make my main lineup before the breakout, but I'll have exposure every slate. Even if it's a throwaway lineup that I just have to donate, I'm going to do it. Jalen Terry, highly questionable. He missed the North Park exhibition because of an ankle issue. So Terry being out only bumps up further guys like Chico Carter, Elijah Fisher. Henley's already solidified. If Terry were to play, it muddies the waters a little bit. Elijah Fisher at 3-2 after the way he played against North Park. Without Terry, I think he becomes a pretty close to main team play. Now, I don't know that I want to play more than one DePaul lineup or more than one DePaul player in a lineup because that doesn't feel very good, for lack of a better term. But at 3-2, Fisher doesn't need to do much. And if you're going to give him 20 minutes with the amount of shot volume he took before, he's probably paying that off really easily. You also have Mac Etienne, the UCLA transfer, who was super raw. He's there at 3-6. He did not play in the exhibition because he is waiting for a medical, not a waiver, but some medical approval to actually play. So I don't think he's going to be available either because he hasn't been practicing. So that's only going to give Nelson and Odin additional minutes there where they're probably not going to come off the floor very much, which makes them very high-level GPP plays too. And it's starting to sound like, damn, DePaul's going to have a short rotation. Maybe we can stack them up. We certainly might be able to. Just keep in mind how bad this DePaul team really is. I think Deshaun Nelson could have a slate breaker performance in him, several this year. I don't believe in Jeremiah Odin. He had a nice game there in the exhibition, but he's never really been that guy during the course of his career that would warrant me paying 7-1 for him. So most of my interest is here at Henley at 4-3, Carter at 4-2, and Fisher at 3-2. That's really where I'm going to be driving most of my exposure. And then the Fort Wayne team here, the top player and cheap, very cheap, as cheap as you can go, I believe is going to be Rashid Bello. Their two main returners are Maximus Nelson and Jalen Jackson. Those are both important pieces to the rotation, but Rashid Bello, who transfers in from UW Parkside, 18 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 5 assists, 43% from long range. We know DePaul isn't going to be very good. I think Rashid Bello at 3K. All I've done this whole show is just give you players at 3K. I feel like total opposite of my philosophy and what I always preach to you. But anyways, Rashid Bello at 3K is a main team play. He's going to start. Let's look at what North Park did against DePaul, where they were ahead of DePaul there for a time. Let's see. Shama Pumphrey. Not gonna lie. I don't know a lot about Shama Pumphrey, but it's a solid name. 17 shot attempts in 35 minutes, 13 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. That's a pretty damn good game there by Pumphrey. Assuming he's the alpha, should have come prepared to the test here. Bello is going to be an alpha, and he's going to put up a big number. So we have Mark Zilla, one of our longtime members, who says he's only happy when the values get 10x. Well, there you go, my friend. You want your 10x play of the day, Rashid Bello at 3K. Probably going to put up 30 fantasy points against DePaul because they're not going to be able to defend him a lick. And I just don't know how they're 12.5-point favorites. I am very confused about that one, my friends, unless there's something that I'm just missing and DePaul is going to, pull out a waiver for a player. JFL's actually got one year of eligibility left because of NIL. And then I'd be like, okay, wow, they're going to cover 12.5. So that's the slate, quick and dirty. Man, I thought it was quicker, but it's over an hour. Okay. I feel pretty good about this one. Core-wise, I mean, like I said, all I've really done is given you guys cheap values, like the lineup that we're rolling out here with the players I've said. We're leaving like, I don't know, 40K on the table or something. So we really let's spend some time here looking at pay-ups so that we can have a clear idea of where we're going to go with all this value. So I've kind of glossed over a lot of these pay-ups. I'm not crazy about nearly 10K for Kalkbrenner. I don't love 9.6 for my man Soriano, even though I do love him as a player. Ledlum, Dingle, and Dennis all feel really overpriced to me, but we got to go somewhere. So Baylor Shireman at 9K, who is typically a luxury pick. We're going to have the salary for him, probably looking at him as a top-tier option for us. Drew Pember at 8.9, a top-tier option for us. And if we end up having, 3-4 solid sub 4K guys in our lineup, we're going to have salary for one of Kalkbrenner and Soriano. I would like to probably lean towards Soriano because I would worry about the blowout affecting Kalkbrenner negatively. And also the fact that if Kalk's not blocking shots and actually rebounding, the shot attempts might not be there for him. And he's got more of a tendency to kind of coast into that 32, 34 range at almost 10K. That's going to be tough. Kind of the, similar to Zach Edey today, where we were kind of like, hey, he's going to be super chalky, but is he going to go over 40? Probably not. He didn't. Kalkbrenner probably not going over 40. So that makes it kind of tough. But then we're looking at raw points, and you might have to just play him. Assuming Soriano's all good to go, I think I take him over Kalkbrenner. The difference is negligible. They're $200 difference, but I think Soriano hits 40 more than Kalkbrenner does. in their respective matchups. So I like to do the semi-balanced build, which is another term that I use all the time, which is instead of, going with the super values and then taking all the expensive guys, I try to wedge in the 7 to 8K guys, just move that up another tier and go up to that 9K range where I do like Pember, I do like Shireman. I could live with Ray J. Dennis. I think obviously he's going to have a big role on that team. I could certainly live with Jameer Young of Maryland, even though I love the Harris kid. That even makes Harris a more of an elite GBV play because that 6K range is going to just end up being ignored by the masses. He's going to end up being like 2% owned, and he could very easily put up a 35 in his first game as a collegiate player. So don't sleep on Maryland freshman there. And then Trey Alexander, who I love at 8-1. So we're just basically probably shoving in 4 guys between 8 and 9K with these values. Priority order of the values, I think that will be helpful because your head's probably swimming with all these different cheapies. Jaden Henley at 4-3. Bello for Fort Wayne, who is just an incredible value there. Unless he doesn't start, then it gets a little shoddy, but it is the last game on the slate, although there are 2 others starting at the same time. So we have some swaps available to us if we want to take them. And then Trey Donaldson or Chaney Johnson. Those are late game values, but the ones I'm really looking at, go to Michigan. We have Terrace Reed at 3.6. That's a really cheap price for him. Silly cheap. Now, earlier in the slate, we talked about values like CJ Nolan at 3.4. The guys we just got done talking about are infinitely better than CJ Nolan and some of this other perspective value that we talked about earlier that seemed okay. We have elite value at our fingertips here in these last 2 or 3 games. So I just want to be very clear about that as well. And even on the North Dakota side with Eli King at 3K, he's a really good option there, but he's behind those other guys that I just mentioned. So just want to be clear about that. Even Sutherland at 3.7 for Lemoyne. Like, Jesus, there's probably too much value here. So my core is going to look like this. Jaden Henley. Trey Alexander, because that's just a price I can't get away from. And all last year Creighton was in the mid 7s, and it was like they're just gonna get 3.5x. But this is a different year for Trey Alexander and a bigger role, so expect him to have a big outing immediately. And then the third core member is with the asterisk, if he's starting, Bello from Fort Wayne. Like, I don't know, I'm just sold. I'm super sold on that kid against DePaul. So this may turn into a mini stack of the DePaul Fort Wayne game for what it's worth. All right, let's pull up, and I'll check out some chatter, but let's pull up the PrizePicks. See what we're working with here. All right, so the board is super lean, but there are a couple that are immediately jumping out at me. One being Denver Jones, 13.5 real points. I think he's got a really good opportunity to score, 20 real. The PRA for Mackenzie Mbako of Indiana, 16.5. I like the over there as well. And then just refreshing where we don't have a lot of options. So I imagine they will add more to the board tomorrow. So I really only have those 2, Denver Jones over 13.5 points and Mackenzie Mbako over 16.5 points, rebounds, and assists. By the way, AJ Storr, Wisconsin, anytime this season they give us a PRA under 20, just slam the over. He's going to be so phenomenal for the Badgers. It's just ridiculous. And he's going to be that one that anytime they give us under 20, you just throw everything that you have on the over. That simple. Really is that simple. All right. And then let's see what we got on the prop market here. If there's anything out just yet. There is pretty light. Denver Jones PRA is plus 100 on DraftKings at 19.5. He might score 20 real, like I just said. So I do like that. Give us a little value at plus 100. Jalen Williams, minus 105, 19.5 PRA. I also like that. Even if he doesn't start, I think that's still a fine one for him. Excuse me. Kel Ware, over 12.5 real points. It is minus 140, but I don't know. I'm sold on Kel Ware for this Indiana team as well. Denver Jones over at 13.5 points at minus 105. We like it on PrizePicks. We like it there. And I would say Jalen Bridges under 12.5 real points at minus 120. I just don't know what to expect from Bridges on a game-to-game basis. And I think the wings and the guards not named Jalen Bridges are going to do really well in this game. And I think he's going to kind of, 8 points, 5 rebounds type of stat line. Could definitely be wrong about that because of his expected high minutes, but he doesn't do a whole lot for me these days, honestly. Would love for him to change that perception, but as of now, that's really kind of how I feel. Xavier Johnson assist props are always ham. 5.5 assists are nice, but it's minus 130. Might kind of take it easy with that initially. I don't want to give you guys, props just to give them to you. So we'll stop there. I think that's pretty good at the moment. Good feedback on the article that we did today. Got some new members on board, people asking about what it actually entails when you do sign up. So the daily plus monthly, which was the FTN daily, but you pay monthly. That's what it is. That gives you access to pro sports, college sports, niche sports, esports, all that stuff, written content, optimizers for the pro level, projections in the NFL, all kinds of tools. And you can use that code NIGHTHOOPS for 50% off of that package. If you want to pay annually to get yourself an even further discount, you can do that. You can go over to FTN Bets. There are packages there that it works with. You're going to get info, all the trackers for the betting side, all the betting articles. Mike Coutrie has a huge, vast amount of information for betting that he provides there. He's one of the best that there is by far in this, corner of the industry. Just an absolute monster when it comes to betting props. So you can definitely make a good amount of money here. There is also worth noting that less companies, sites, people are offering CBB content this year. That also really kind of enhances the edge for those that pay attention. Less, might lead to a little bit of less casuals here and there, but overall, it's a good thing because it does mean we're going to have spread out ownership. We had several plays today that ended up being, 10 to 15% owned, and they played really well. Last year, those same plays and their prices would have been 40% owned. It would have been like, man, but just that little bit of two sites off the board that normally would have offered college basketball content don't, and you're already seeing a difference on day one. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Definitely something that I am freaking amazingly happy about because our, pre-2017 ban, we had the huge edge. Like you'd get guys who are, 5% owned just blasting off. After the ban, they were like 35% owned. I think we're going to see a little bit of a pre-2017 ban action going on this year. So it's going to be fun. Please make sure you are hitting the like button, sharing the content. There is a lot of shows in the works this year. I'm going to be doing 3 CBB variations of the Super Show each week until we get into probably February, March. We're still going to be doing the 2 CFB shows as well. So that means we'll be doing 5 a week. Please continue to support this content. If you are successful winning, feel free to tweet us out. Screenshots are appreciated. If it's a rough night and you want to talk about that too, I'm always available in DMs. I don't claim to be a 100% winner by any means, but I do feel confident that you'll be competitive with the data and info that we provide. And the next couple of weeks of this November are going to be really, really fun because all these new teams, new players, there's just a lot of unknowns for people. So get over to ftndaily.com, sign up there for your first month, 50% off. Check out the Discord. There's already 3 or 4 new people in there today talking about how they love the Discord with the injury news, the starter news, all that good stuff. It really does make the package worthwhile, in my opinion. Appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. We will be back Thursday night. We're going to take tomorrow off from the shows. Back Thursday night, CFB variation of the Super Show with my man Jay Kuchek. That'll be 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST for those of you not driving a covered wagon. And I will see you guys then. See ya.